Well, in China, COVID continues to be a leading cause of concern for investors and for others who feel its data does not give an accurate picture of the situation. Here's what the World Health Organization's Emergencies Program Director had to say.
We know there are difficulties in all countries very often in recording hospital-related admissions and use of ICU facilities. But again, we believe that the current numbers being published from China underrepresent the true impact of the disease in terms of hospital admissions, in terms of ICU admissions, and particularly in terms of deaths.
Well, here to weigh in on that and the outlook for the pharmaceutical industry is BofA Global Research's Senior Pharmacy Analyst Geoff Meacham. Geoff, good to have you on the show. So I first want to get your take on how you think the situation coming out of China is being handled by, say, the US and by the EU as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for having me. For the most part, I would say, it's difficult for the companies that we follow in the pharma space to really manage the situation in China, other than just to provide enough supply. So vaccines and orals, for example, Pfizer's Paxlovid and Moderna and Pfizer's vaccines as well. So there hasn't really been a supply constraint there. I would say China has purchased incremental amounts of the COVID therapies, but not anywhere near like what we're seeing from the infection rates. And so that's a big thing to watch in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, how big of a catalyst do you think that can be when you look at some of the big biopharma names? We think back to the height of the pandemic, how well a Moderna or a Pfizer did. When you think about the needs over in China, do you see that as a significant catalyst for these companies?
I don't really from an investor perspective. And I say that because, 2020, 2021 were years of, sort of 2 years of a windfall, really, for the Pfizers and Modernas of the world. Also, Lilly benefited, Regeneron, companies that have, any sort of product for COVID, be it antibody or vaccine. But I would say last year, the numbers started to come down a little bit. And then 23 and beyond are really years where we're not expecting, a big uptake. And so if stocks move on let's say temporary Chinese demand, the thought is that may not have, the durability that people really expected prior to the beginning of the pandemic.
And we know that BofA downgraded Pfizer to neutral from buy, partly because obviously that the heydays of the pandemic, at least in the US and for most of the world, is behind us. And you also said they're continuing to enter increasingly crowded markets as well. Where does the growth story for Pfizer then go from here?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are a number of really exciting products that they have, coming out. So, if for migraine, for example, for some GI diseases like ulcerative colitis, some inflammation broadly, hematology, oncology. So these things they're all new products. They have some sort of differentiation, or they could be launching, in the next, say, 6 to 12 months. The issue is that, they're just not going to be big enough to move the needle for a top line that Pfizer has. And you have at the same time, COVID contracting this year and next year. So, it's we're not saying that, it won't happen, but I think these new launches and these new products are not really going to build momentum, I think, until, say 3-4 years from now. And that'll be about the same time frame that Pfizer is going to face some big patent expiries. So we're not negative on it. We're just saying, maybe better places to put money for this year.
Yeah, Geoff, you mentioned COVID contracting. Obviously, the strains are still there, but not at the level that we saw over the last few years. With that in mind, what are some of the big biotech, biopharma names you're especially bullish on, given the pipeline?
Yep. Yeah, so there's a couple that we like in the biotech space. So Vertex is one of them. The very significantly, very rapidly growing CF business, cystic fibrosis is their core franchise. But they have an encore to that with, a sickle cell drug, maybe launching end of this year, and perhaps a pain drug, which could be de-risked in the next couple of quarter or two. The other one we like is BioMarin, more of a rare disease kind of orphan drug company. A very stable base of growing, rare disease assets. But the big one is Roctavian, which is a gene therapy, cell therapy for hemophilia. It's approved in Europe, but could be approved in the U.S. in the next couple of months. And that would really start to, drive top line and really the adoption there has a lot of runway to it, obviously post-approval.
And we'll certainly be keeping an eye also on M&A in the space as well. BofA Senior Pharma Analyst Geoff Meacham, thank you for joining us this morning.